Well, let's go to these by-elections, because there's talk that these defeats of the Conservatives in the Wakefield and Tiverton and Honiton by-elections was a humiliating defeat. That word's been used for the Conservatives, but there wasn't much joy for either of the major parties. Now, I should say to our viewers, voting's not compulsory in Britain. But David, am I right in saying that the turnout in Wakefield was only 20%? In other words, 20% of eligible voters turned out. That makes it one of the lowest in history. Is that true?
That is correct. And the actual lowest in history was only 18.2%. But that was an absolute safe seat. It was a foregone conclusion, and nobody really expected anything else. This one was actually inferior, tightly contested seat, important seat, and yet only 1 in 5 voters could be bothered to go out. And a lot of that was because Conservatives stayed at home, but also it was because the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, is one of the least inspiring people on the planet, and just couldn't persuade people to go out and back his party.
Well, let's come to Starmer, because all the focus is on the Conservatives. But as you have written, they're not figures which suggest that Labor and the Lib Dems would sweep the country in any election, general election or by-election. Now, in Tiverton and Honiton, the Labor-Liberal vote combined went from 25% to 29%. The Conservative vote collapsed from 43% to 20%. 20,000 Conservative voters stayed at home. So, David, there's not much joy here for either major party, is there?
No, there isn't. And the protest from the Conservatives was not to vote for somebody else. It was to stay at home, which kind of suggests that in a general election, even perhaps with Boris, if the Conservative vote comes out, they'll win again, because there seems to be no appetite really for Labour, even though they're slightly ahead in the polls, but it's only slightly ahead in the polls, which is pretty normal for a mid-term government, really.
David, major political parties, though, around the world are under siege. We see this now in America, Democrats and Republicans. We see it in France. We've seen it here in Australia. We have a Labor Party in government here whose primary vote in the May election, and it's compulsory here, was 32%. So the Tory party chairman now, in the light of the by-election results, Sir Oliver Dowden has resigned. Is there a chance, and I think you've written this, that the very talented 42-year-old Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who's only been in Parliament for 7 years, is there talk that he may resign?
Well, there certainly was on Friday morning last week. We're all on Rishi Watch, as we called it. And this is because him and Oliver Dowden are very close friends. Oliver Dowden had, in theory, agreed to run Rishi's leadership campaign when the time came. So there was a feeling that, with Oliver going, Rishi would be the next one to go and effectively trigger no confidence in Boris and an exit.
So when you say go, do you mean out of the Parliament or just go from the Chancellorship?
Just from the Chancellorship,
right?
Because a lot of us had written him off as a potential leadership candidate